We appreciate every one of you. We'd love to know where you're tuning in from right now, so drop a comment below. Now, let's jump into today's story. The early sunlight stretched long shadows across Michael Pierce's office as he went over the final calculations for the Willow Creek Bridge project. At 47, his graying hair and defined features gave him an authoritative presence that matched his well-earned reputation. The wall behind his desk was covered with awards and certificates, proof of his ability to turn failing infrastructure projects into major successes. Michael? His assistant Claire called from the door. The board meeting starts in 5 minutes. Michael gathered his presentation materials with practiced precision. Thanks, Claire. Has the finance team sent the updated projections? Just came in. I've added them to your slides. Claire handed him a sleek tablet. And congratulations in advance. Word is, the promotion's already decided. He gave her a small smile. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. The boardroom fell silent as Michael presented his findings. The Willow Creek Bridge project had been losing money for months before he took over. Now, his innovative redesign would save the city millions while improving its structural integrity. Excellent work, Michael, Chairman Carter said after the presentation. The board has unanimously decided to promote you to Senior Project Director, effective immediately. Handshakes and congratulations followed, but Michael's thoughts were already on his next challenge. Success was a journey, not a destination. Back in his office, he called Laura, his wife of 20 years. Michael, how did it go? Laura's voice was filled with its usual warmth. Got the promotion. Thinking of celebrating tonight at the Grove. Oh, darling, I'm sorry. I'm stuck in a client meeting that's running late. Can we rain check? Michael noticed the background noise. Music and chatter that didn't sound like her usual quiet studio. No problem. Everything okay there? Sounds like a busy night. Just a meeting with some new clients. You know how it goes, Laura replied. Michael's mind wandered to the thought of Ethan, the yoga instructor Laura had started seeing a few months ago for stress management. He had met Ethan once and noticed the way the man's gaze lingered a little too long. Take it easy, okay, he said. After hanging up, Michael opened their joint account statement. Another withdrawal, for $1,500 marked as home decor consultation. Odd choice of words. For what should have been a standard design service. The drive home felt longer than usual, a heavy headache building at the back of his head. The house was quiet when he arrived. Its modern design was a reflection of Laura's artistic style. Family photos lined the hallway. Wedding pictures, their son Luke's college graduation, vacations that now felt like distant memories. Michael headed to his home office to grab the medication for his headache. The house's open layout made voices easily audible, and he heard Luke's voice from his bedroom upstairs. Yeah, Mia, my dad still doesn't know. Mom's boyfriend even picks me up from school when he's in town. Michael froze at the sound of his son's voice. They're planning to move to Oregon once Dad finishes paying for my tuition. Mom says Ethan has connections there. I know, right? She says Dad's too boring. At least Ethan takes her to these great spots. Michael's hand lingered on the drawer handle. The medicine forgotten. He sat in the dimly lit room, his mind already running through the pieces of this unsettling new puzzle. The patterns were coming together disturbingly well. Laura's increasing absences, the mysterious withdrawals, Luke's newfound interest in Oregon. Schools despite having a great local university. The next morning, Michael stuck to his routine. Breakfast with Laura, who was preoccupied with her phone under the table. He noticed the small smile on her lips as she read a message and the way she angled the screen away from him. Ethan called yesterday, Laura mentioned offhandedly. His business is doing well. That investment really gave them a boost. Michael stirred his coffee, his mind churning. Which investment was that? Oh, from those earlier backers he mentioned. Laura waved it off. He's hosting another meeting today. You should really meet him sometime. Ethan, another piece of the puzzle. The one who could talk his way out of anything. Now it seemed he was talking his way into something far more dangerous. At work, Michael accessed the company's contracted investigation firm's database. Raoul Levy's profile stood out. Former military intelligence, specialized in corporate espionage, known for discretion. Michael sent a carefully worded email requesting a meeting. That afternoon, in a coffee shop far from his usual spots, Michael sat across from Levy, a compact man with watchful eyes. "Tell me about Ethan Knox," Michael said, sliding across an envelope containing his initial payment. Levy's investigation revealed the first layer of deception within days. Ethan Knox had never completed his yoga instructor certification. His real estate license had been revoked in 3 states for ethical violations. His pattern was consistent. Identify wealthy women, preferably married, establish trust through wellness coaching, then slowly work his way into their lives and their bank accounts. "Your brother's startup," Levy reported, "received a significant investment 6 months ago. $300,000 routed through a shell company called Knox Enterprises." Michael's jaw tightened. The amount matched several large withdrawals from his and Laura's joint account. Withdrawals Laura had insisted were for their son Luke's college fund. The neighborhood played its part in the deception. Michael watched from his home office window as Linda Carlson picked up Laura for their book club, the same book club that met at different houses each week, but never seemed to actually discuss books. The Wilders next door would wave cheerfully whenever Laura left for her yoga sessions, their teenage son oddly well-informed about Michael's work schedule. One evening, Michael followed the thread to its source. He parked outside Greg's startup offices long after business hours. Laura's car was there, parked next to a sleek sports car he recognized as Ethan's. Through the glass front of the building, he saw them in Greg's office, Laura laughing at something Ethan said, his hand resting possessively on her waist. Greg sat at his desk, playing with his phone, the perfect accomplice providing the perfect cover. Luke's role became clearer too. Michael reviewed his son's recent credit card statements, coffee shops near Ethan's apartment, Uber rides that coincided with Laura's appointments. His son had become their unwitting accomplice, or perhaps not so unwitting. The betrayal crystallized one morning as Michael reviewed the documents Levy had gathered. Laura's father, Judge Martin Reynolds, retired, had been advising her on divorce proceedings for months. Notes from their meetings detailed strategies to maximize her claims on Michael's assets, using his long work hours and emotional unavailability as leverage. Michael sat in his office, surrounded by the evidence of his family's betrayal, and began to plan. The engineer in him approached it like any other project: identify the problems, analyze the variables, design the solution. The mounting pressure behind his eyes reminded him of the migraines that had plagued him lately, but he pushed through. Pain was temporary. Revenge, when properly executed, was permanent. He started with Luke's college fund. A quick review confirmed his suspicions. Laura had been systematically draining it, moving money through a series of accounts. The final semester's payment was due soon, after which they probably planned to empty what remained. The neighborhood's involvement ran deeper than he'd initially suspected. The Carlsons had received a loan from Laura, $40,000 from Michael's money. The Wilders had a similar arrangement. Each family had their own secrets, their own reasons for helping maintain the facade. Michael worked late into the night, documenting everything. Every transaction, every meeting, every lie. The engineer in him appreciated the elegance of their deception. How each piece supported the others, how the structure of their betrayal had been carefully built over months, perhaps years. But engineers knew better than anyone. Every structure had its weak points. Every system could be dismantled. It was simply a matter of identifying the critical supports and removing them in the correct order. The office chair creaked as Michael leaned back, his eyes moving from document to document. Laura's carefully crafted persona as the supportive wife, Ethan's manufactured image as a wellness guru, Luke's role as their unwitting accomplice, Greg's startup serving as their meeting ground and money laundering operation. All the pieces were in place. Now it was time to begin the real work. Through his office window, Michael watched the sun rise over the city. The Willow Creek Bridge project had taught him an important lesson. Sometimes, to save a structure, you had to let parts of it fall. The weak points, the compromised sections, they all had to go before you could rebuild something stronger. He picked up his phone and dialed Catherine Parsons, the city's most ruthless divorce attorney. "Miss Parsons?" "Michael Pierce. I need your help with a rather complex dismantling project." The pieces were set, the calculations made. Now it was time to show his family the true price of betrayal. The scene unfolded like a well-rehearsed play at the Carlsons' dinner party that weekend. Laura wore her favorite blue dress, the one Ethan had complimented during their first private yoga session. She worked the room with practiced charm, touching Michael's arm occasionally for show, all while exchanging knowing glances with their host, Linda Carlson. Michael, the Willow Creek Bridge project is fascinating, Tom Wilder said, swirling his whiskey. Must be keeping you busy at all hours. Very busy, Laura interjected with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Some weeks I hardly see him at all. Michael noted how Ethan, standing across the room in designer jeans and a tight-fitting Henley, smirked at this comment. The yoga instructor was playing his role perfectly, the spiritual guide offering private sessions to select clients, all while building his network among the neighborhood's wealthy wives. Dad, can I take the car tomorrow? Luke appeared at his elbow, his expression carefully neutral. I have a study group meeting. Of course, princess. Michael's voice betrayed nothing of what he knew about these study groups, how they coincided perfectly with Laura and Ethan's meetings, how his son served as their lookout and alibi. Later that night, Michael sat in his home office, reviewing the latest reports from Raoul Levy. The investigator had been thorough, documenting every meeting, every transaction, every little betrayal. The photos showed a clear pattern. Laura arriving at Greg's startup offices, Ethan following shortly after. Luke's car parked nearby, keeping watch while sending texts about study sessions and client meetings. The financial trail was equally damning. Laura had diverted over $500,000 from their joint accounts, routing it through various shells and fronts. Some went to Ethan's California property purchases, some to Greg's startup, and some to buy the silence and cooperation of their neighbors. Michael's phone buzzed, a text from Catherine Parsons. Documents ready. Moving forward on your signal. He looked at the family photo on his desk, Laura, Luke, and himself at Luke's high school graduation. All smiles, all perfect, all fake. The frame's glass reflected his own image. A successful man who had dedicated his life to building things, only to discover his family had been systematically dismantling everything he'd created. The migraine was back, pulsing behind his eyes, but Michael welcomed the pain. It helped him focus, helped him remember why he needed to stay sharp. In engineering, precision was everything. One miscalculation, one moment of emotional weakness, and the entire project could collapse. Through the house's excellent acoustics, another of Laura's design choices, he could hear her on the phone in their bedroom, her voice low but clear. No, Ethan. He doesn't suspect a thing. Yes. Once Luke's last tuition payment clears. I know, baby. I can't wait to start our new life. He's so wrapped up in his precious bridges, he wouldn't notice if I danced naked in his office. Michael allowed himself a small smile. In engineering, every stress test revealed new weaknesses. Every failure pointed the way to a stronger design. His family had taught him the ultimate lesson in structural integrity. Sometimes the most devastating forces came from within. He turned back to his computer and began to type. The dismantling would begin soon, and like every project he'd ever managed, this one would be executed with absolute precision. After all, he hadn't earned his reputation by leaving jobs half-finished. The first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon as Michael finished his preparations. In a few hours, Laura would wake up and go about her day, confident in the perfection of her plan. Luke would head to his study group, believing his role as lookout was still a secret. Greg would open his startup's offices, unaware that his money laundering operation was about to implode. And Michael? Michael would do what he did best. Systematically, methodically, ruthlessly solve the problem in front of him. Because that's what engineers did. They identified structural weaknesses, and then they eliminated them. The sun rose fully over the city, its light catching the glass and steel of the buildings Michael had helped design and save. It was going to be a perfect day for demolition. Raoul Levy sat across from Michael in a private meeting room at the Willow Creek Bridge project site, spreading photographs and financial documents across the table. The private investigator's reputation for discretion had made him the perfect choice for this delicate operation. Let's start with the money trail, Levy said, pulling out a complex flowchart. Your wife's been systematic. Every withdrawal marked as home renovation research or college expenses has been rerouted through a series of shell companies. Michael studied the diagram. Show me Ethan's involvement. Knox established the first shell company 2 weeks after meeting your wife. Levy placed 3 more files on the table. He's done this before: Arizona, Nevada, and Oregon. Different names, same pattern. He positions himself as a spiritual guide, then gradually takes control of their finances. The other victims? Michael asked. Levy's expression hardened slightly. 3 wealthy women, all married. 2 lost everything in divorce. The third, he paused, committed suicide when she discovered the extent of his manipulation. Knox walked away, clean each time. Michael's fingers traced the financial flow on the diagram. The California property? Beachfront. Estate in Malibu. Purchased through Knox Enterprises last month. Levy pulled up satellite images on his tablet. $6 million property. The down payment came directly from your joint account. Laundered through your brother's startup. Speaking of my brother, Michael said, his voice tight. Greg's startup is the perfect front. Levy produced more documents. They're creating fake consulting contracts. Your wife transfers money to shell companies, which then invest in the startup. The startup pays Knox Enterprises for strategic planning, which funds the California property and their other expenses. Michael nodded, his engineer's mind cataloging each piece of evidence. The neighborhood involvement? The Carlsons received $40,000 marked as a personal loan. The Wilders? $35,000. Levy showed bank statements. Both couples have their own secrets. Linda Carlson's having an affair with her tennis instructor. Tom Wilder has gambling debts. Your wife and Knox leveraged this information to build their network of alibis. And Luke? Michael asked. Levy hesitated before pulling out another file. Your daughter's role is more significant than we initially thought. She's not just providing alibis or acting as lookout. She's been helping Ethan move money, delivering documents between accounts. She thinks she's just running errands for her mother, but she's actually been participating in money laundering. Michael's expression remained neutral, but his fingers tightened on the edge of the table. Document everything. Every transaction. Every meeting. Every phone call. After Levy left, Michael made another call. Catherine Parsons, the city's most ruthless divorce attorney, agreed to meet him immediately. In Parsons' corner office, overlooking the city courthouse, Michael watched her review Levy's findings. Your wife's been clever, Parsons said, adjusting her reading glasses. Having her father advise her was particularly shrewd. Judge Reynolds knows every loophole in family court. Tell me about his involvement. He's been coaching her on asset division strategies for months. Parsons pulled out court records, weekly meetings disguised as family dinners. He's advising her on how to maximize her claims using your work schedule and emotional unavailability as leverage. Can he influence the proceedings? He's still well connected, already making calls to former colleagues, trying to ensure the case gets assigned to a friendly judge. Parsons smiled thinly. But his involvement in hiding assets will be his undoing. No judge will touch this case once that comes out. Michael leaned forward. I want to protect Emma's education. Whatever happens, she needs to finish medical school. We'll set up an irrevocable trust. They won't be able to touch it. Parsons made notes. But Michael, you understand what this means. Your daughter's involvement in their scheme will become part of the official record. She made her choice. Michael's voice was steel. Actions have consequences. Over the next 2 weeks, Michael orchestrated his counter-strategy with military precision. Each evening, after Laura left for her yoga sessions, he worked systematically through their financial history, documenting every suspicious transaction. The surveillance footage Levy provided painted a damning picture. Laura and Ethan meeting at Greg's startup offices, their behavior growing more brazen each time. Emma making bank runs, delivering envelopes between accounts. The neighborhood couples providing alibis while accepting payments for their silence. Your brother's startup is the weak link, Levy reported during their next meeting. Greg's getting sloppy with the paperwork. Michael reviewed the documents. Fake consulting contracts, non-existent clients, inflated fees, all designed to launder stolen money through the business. Late one night, as Michael worked in his home office, he overheard Laura on the phone. Everything's perfect, she was saying. Ethan's found the most amazing house in Malibu. Once Michael makes that last tuition payment, she laughed. No, he suspects. Nothing. Too busy with his precious bridges to notice anything. That's what makes it so perfect. He trusts me completely with the finances. The next day, Michael met with his bank's trust department. The officer, Janet Shin, reviewed his proposal carefully. An irrevocable trust for your daughter's education? She looked up. Once established, neither you nor your wife will have access to these funds. Exactly, Michael said, signing the documents. The only requirement is Emma's GPA stays above 3.8. The money can only be used for tuition and educational expenses. And your other assets? Move them to the secure accounts we discussed, but leave the joint accounts active. I want to see who tries to access them. That evening, Michael met with Judge Reynolds himself, using a charity gala as cover. The older man's confidence was evident in his every gesture. Michael, Amanda tells me you're working too hard as usual. Reynolds clapped him on the shoulder. You should take more time for family. Actually, I've been thinking about estate planning, Michael replied smoothly. Given your experience in family court, I'd value your opinion on asset protection strategies. Reynolds' eyes lit up with barely concealed interest. Always happy to advise. Family. Why don't you come by my office next week? Perfect. I'll bring the financial records Amanda's been keeping. The slight widening of Reynolds' eyes confirmed Michael's suspicions. The judge quickly recovered, but the damage was done. The trigger came sooner than expected. Michael's phone buzzed during a project meeting. An alert from his bank. Someone was attempting a large transfer from the joint accounts. He excused himself and called Levy. They're moving now. Ethan just entered the bank on 5th Street. Levy confirmed. Your wife's waiting in the car. Should I follow? No need. Let's see how this plays out. Within an hour, Michael's phone exploded with messages. Amanda, the bank system is down. Did you change something? Greg. Hey bro. Having some issues with those investment transfers we discussed? Salvador's number, which he'd never seen before. We need to talk about Amanda's accounts. Michael let them stew for 3 hours before responding to Amanda. In meetings, bank called about suspicious activity. Had to freeze everything temporarily. We'll check later. Her response came instantly. What? We need access now. Emma's tuition is due. He didn't reply. Instead, he called Emma's university directly, speaking with the bursar's office. This is Michael Newton. I understand there's been some confusion about my daughter's tuition payments. Oh yes, Mr. Newton. We received an attempt to withdraw all funds from her education account today, but it was blocked by trust restrictions. Excellent. Please ensure all future transactions require my direct authorization. That evening, Michael arrived home to find Emma waiting in his office, her face flushed with anger. Mom told me everything, she said. How you've been embezzling from your company. How you're trying to ruin her and Ethan's lives because you're jealous of their relationship. Michael sat down calmly, opened his laptop, and turned it toward her. Your mother and Ethan attempted to empty your college fund today. They've been planning this for months. The California house they're planning to move to? Purchased with money stolen from your education account. Emma's face paled as she looked at the documentation. Bank statements, transfer records, surveillance photos. The evidence was overwhelming. But the study sessions, the errands, were cover for their meetings and money laundering. Michael's voice remained steady. Those documents you've been delivering? Financial instruments for moving stolen money. Your mother and Ethan planned to leave you with massive student debt while they enjoyed your education fund in Malibu. Emma sank into a chair, her hands shaking as she scrolled through the evidence. Dad, save it. Michael stood. Your trust fund is secure now. Maintain a 3.8 GPA and your education is guaranteed. That's more than they planned to leave you with. Michael's voice was steady, but Emma's eyes welled up with tears. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice breaking. You knew enough, Michael said coldly, moving toward the door. You chose your side, Emma. Now you'll live with those consequences. Later that night, Laura stormed into his office, Ethan in tow. Her carefully maintained poise had cracked, revealing the desperation beneath. "What have you done?" she demanded. "Those accounts were joint property. Were they?" Michael looked up calmly. "Like the joint property you've been funneling to your boyfriend's shell companies?" Ethan stepped forward, his usual calm replaced by barely controlled anger. "Listen, man, you don't want to do this. Think about your reputation." "My reputation?" Michael's laugh was cold. "That's interesting coming from a con man who's done this to 3 other women. Tell me, Ethan, does Laura know about Helen Richards? The woman who killed herself after you destroyed her life?" Laura's head whipped toward Ethan, the first crack in their united front. "He's lying," Ethan said quickly. "Baby, he's just trying to turn you against me." "The documentation is with my lawyers," Michael continued calmly, "along with evidence of every transaction, every meeting, every conspiracy you've orchestrated, including Emma's role as your unwitting money mule." "You wouldn't dare expose our daughter," Laura hissed. "Our daughter?" Michael's voice could have frozen fire. "You were planning to abandon her with massive debt while you lived off her college fund. Don't pretend to care about her now." "This isn't over," Ethan threatened. "Actually, it is." Michael turned back to his work. "You have until tomorrow to return the money you stole, or the evidence goes to the FBI. Your choice." After they left, Michael sat in his darkened office, listening to the sound of Laura throwing things in their bedroom. His phone buzzed with messages from Greg, from Judge Reynolds, from the Carlsons and Wilders, all frantically trying to understand what was happening to their carefully constructed scheme. Michael ignored them all. The first strike had landed perfectly, exposing the rot at the foundation of their conspiracy. Now the real demolition was about to begin. Through his window, he could see the Harrison Bridge illuminated against the night sky. Like any good engineer, he knew that the most spectacular collapses came not from external forces, but from carefully calculated internal pressures. Tomorrow, the real work would begin, but for now, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The look on their faces when they realized he'd known everything. That alone was worth the price of admission. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, lightning illuminating the city in harsh flashes. Michael watched it with appreciation. Nature understood timing too, the perfect backdrop for the destruction to come. Michael sat in his new high-rise apartment, reviewing the final pieces of evidence on his laptop. The city lights spread below him like a circuit board, each connection representing another pressure point in his carefully constructed plan. "The SEC filing is ready," Catherine Parsons said through the speakerphone. "One word from you, and Greg's startup faces a full investigation." "What about Judge Reynolds?" Michael asked. "Our contact at the FBI was very interested in the evidence of his previous bribes. They're prepared to launch an investigation the moment we give them the documentation." Michael checked his watch. 7:15 p.m. Laura would be at her book club meeting with Ethan, using the Carlsons' house as cover again. Everything is prepared. The divorce papers, the evidence packets, the asset freeze documents. Time to begin the endgame. "Execute everything as planned," he told Parsons. "I'll handle the personal aspects." He opened his secure email and sent the first trigger, an anonymous tip to the SEC about Greg's startup. The documentation was comprehensive. Fake invoices, money laundering schemes, fraudulent investor reports. Within hours, his brother's carefully constructed house of cards would begin to collapse. Next came the neighborhood couples. Michael had prepared individual packages for the spouses of each conspirator. Tom Wilder's wife would receive proof of not just his gambling debts, but the affairs he'd helped cover up. Linda Carlson's husband would learn about her tennis instructor and the money she'd accepted to provide alibis. The phone rang. "Greg, right on schedule." "Derek," his brother's voice carried barely contained panic. "The SEC just showed up at the office. They're seizing our servers, our documents." "What the hell is happening?" "Interesting timing," Michael replied calmly. "I was just reviewing some of your company's investment records, particularly those involving Knox Enterprises." A long pause. "Bro, I can explain. You helped them steal my money, Greg. Used your startup to launder it. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out?" "It wasn't like that. Amanda said you were controlling, that she needed help. Save it for the SEC investigators." Michael's voice was ice. I'm sure they'll be very interested in how you helped a known con man defraud investors. Known con man? What are you talking about? Ask Ethan about Helen Richards, or Mary Sullivan, or any of his other victims. Michael allowed himself a small smile. Better hurry. Your investors are about to receive some very interesting documents about where their money really went. He hung up as Greg was still pleading, then sent the second trigger. Evidence of Judge Reynolds' past bribes to the FBI. The retired judge had been careful, but not careful enough. His pattern of favorable rulings for certain law firms, followed by mysterious deposits in offshore accounts, formed a damning pattern. Michael's phone buzzed again. Laura, the SEC is at Greg's office, she said without preamble. What did you do? Me? I'm just a boring engineer, remember? Too focused on my precious bridges to notice anything. Derek, listen to me, whatever you think you know. I know everything, Laura. Every meeting with Ethan at Greg's office. Every dollar you stole. Every plan you made to abandon our daughter with massive debt while you enjoyed her college fund in Malibu. Her voice turned sharp. You can't prove any of that. Check your email, Michael replied. I just sent you a sample of what the FBI now has, including footage of you and Ethan laughing about how easily you fooled me. The audio quality is excellent. They'll have no trouble understanding you calling me a predictable fool who trusts me too much to check the accounts. Silence on the line. Your father's involvement was sloppy, Michael continued. Accepting bribes during his judgeship? The FBI is very interested in reviewing his old cases. You wouldn't dare, Laura hissed. He's Emma's grandfather. Like that mattered when you planned to steal her future? Michael's voice remained clinical. The same Emma you used as a money mule in your little scheme? We can work this out. Laura's voice turned pleading. For Emma's sake. Emma's education is secure in an irrevocable trust, Michael replied. More than you planned to leave her with. He paused. As for working it out, check your bedroom when you get home. I left some paperwork for you and Ethan to review. The neighborhood erupted in chaos over the next few hours. Linda Carlson's husband threw her out after receiving proof of her affair. Tom Wilder's wife discovered not just his gambling debts, but the multiple affairs he'd helped cover up. The carefully constructed network of lies collapsed like a house of cards. Michael watched from his new apartment as police cars gathered outside Judge Reynolds' house. The FBI had moved quickly on the bribery evidence. Tomorrow's newspapers would destroy what remained of the retired judge's reputation. His phone kept buzzing, desperate messages from Laura, Greg, the neighbors. He ignored them all, focusing instead on the final phase of his plan. At exactly 10 p.m., he received confirmation. Laura had returned home and found his package. The security cameras he'd left in place captured her reaction as she opened it. Divorce papers citing fraud and conspiracy. Evidence of every betrayal, including Emma's unknowing role. Notice of his resignation and acceptance of a position in Seattle. Documentation of all secured assets. The USB drive containing their recorded conversations. Ethan arrived. Shortly after, his calm demeanor shattered as he read through the evidence. He has everything. Laura's voice was clear through the security feed. Every meeting, every transfer, every bluffing. Ethan snapped, but his face had lost its confident smile. He can't prove. He has video of us in Greg's office, Laura interrupted. Audio of everything we said. Records of the property purchases. The shell companies. Laura sank onto the bed. He even has proof of what you did to those other women. Ethan's mask cracked completely. Those bitches deserved what they got. And so do you if you're stupid enough to believe. Get out. Laura's voice was hollow. Just get out. Baby, don't let him manipulate you. Manipulate me? She laughed hysterically. Look at this evidence. He knew everything, recorded everything, and we played right into his hands. You said he was too boring, too predictable to figure it out. We can still get to the accounts. They're frozen. All of them. Even Emma's trust fund is locked where we can't touch it. Laura's voice broke. It's over, Ethan. He destroyed us so completely. Michael switched off the feed. In his new apartment, surrounded by the essential items he'd gradually moved over the past weeks, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Every calculation had been perfect. Every reaction predicted. every weakness exploited. His phone buzzed one final time. Emma? Her voice was small, broken. I just saw the divorce papers. The evidence. I didn't know about the college fund, about what they planned. But you knew enough, Michael replied calmly. Every time you played lookout, every document you carried, every lie you told. I'm sorry. Please, I didn't understand. Your trust fund is secure. Maintain a 3.8 GPA, and your education is guaranteed. That's more consideration than you showed me. Dad, please don't shut me out. Goodbye, Emma. Contact my lawyers if you have questions about the trust requirements. He ended the call and walked to the window. Below, the city continued its rhythmic pattern, unaware of the destruction he'd orchestrated. The Harrison Bridge stood in the distance, a testament to his ability to solve complex structural problems. Some people might have sought reconciliation, might have allowed emotion to weaken their resolve. But Michael was an engineer. He understood that some structures couldn't be repaired once the foundation was compromised. Sometimes, the only solution was complete demolition and rebuilding. Somewhere else, his phone buzzed again. Confirmation that the SEC had frozen Greg's startup's assets. More messages followed. The FBI expanding their investigation into Judge Reynolds' past cases, the Carlsons filing for divorce, the Wilders' marriage imploding as more affairs came to light. Laura's text carried desperation. The house is half empty. Where are you? He didn't respond. Let her discover gradually how thoroughly he'd planned this. How every item he'd owned before their marriage, every asset he'd purchased afterward, had been quietly moved and secured. Let her face the frozen accounts, the pending litigation, the complete dismantling of her California dreams. The next morning, Michael walked into his office at the engineering firm and submitted his resignation. His new position in Seattle was already secured, the contract signed, the arrangements made. But the Harrison Bridge project his boss protested is completed, documented, and ready for handover, Michael replied. Like every project I've ever managed. He left the office for the last time, ignoring the messages accumulating on his phone. Laura had discovered she couldn't access any accounts. Ethan's creditors had found him. Greg's investors were demanding answers. Judge Reynolds' colleagues were distancing themselves as the FBI investigation expanded. The local news was already picking up the stories. Prominent judge under FBI investigation. Tech startup faces SEC probe. Multiple divorce filings, rock-exclusive neighborhood. Michael drove to his new apartment, watching his old life disappear in the rearview mirror. He'd given them exactly what they deserved. Laura and Ethan's dreams shattered, Greg's startup imploding, the neighborhood couples facing their own destruction, Emma learning the cost of betrayal while still receiving an education she didn't deserve. His phone buzzed one final time. Catherine Parsons. It's done, she said. Every asset secured, every account frozen, every piece of evidence submitted. They won't recover from this. Good. Michael looked out over his new view. Send me the Seattle paperwork. Time to build something new. The sun set over the city, casting long shadows across the Harrison Bridge. Michael Newton had built his reputation by solving impossible problems, by turning failing projects into successes. Now he'd applied those same skills to dismantling the elaborate deception his family had constructed. Let them face the consequences of their choices. Let them understand that every betrayal had a price. He had a new life to build, and engineers didn't waste time looking back at demolished structures. The final text from Laura remained unanswered. How long did you know? Long enough, he thought. Long enough to plan the perfect demolition. The Seattle skyline beckoned in his mind. New projects, new challenges, new structures to build. Behind him, the carefully orchestrated destruction would continue, each betrayer facing their own personal collapse. Michael Newton had given them exactly what they deserved, the perfect execution of their imperfect betrayal. Extended epilogue. 5 years later, the Seattle skyline painted a stark silhouette against the morning sun as Michael Newton reviewed blueprints in his corner office. At 50, his success had only grown. 3 major infrastructure projects completed ahead of schedule, 2 industry awards, and a reputation for turning impossible situations into triumphs. Mr. Newton? Sarah Chin, his assistant, knocked on the door. The mayor's office called. They want to fast-track the waterfront development project. Send them the preliminary assessments, Michael replied, not looking up from his work. And the background check on that new engineering firm? Just came in. Clean record. Solid financials. Sarah hesitated. Also, Ms. Parsons called from back east. She said you want to know about some developments. Michael nodded, already reaching for his phone. Catherine Parsons had kept tabs on the aftermath of his departure, monitoring the collapse of his former life with professional thoroughness. Amanda's furniture store job didn't last, Parsons reported without preamble. She's on her third retail position in 2 years. The bankruptcy proceedings finally completed. She couldn't keep up the payments on her studio apartment. Salvador facing trial in Nevada. 3 more victims came forward after your evidence exposed his pattern. The DA's offering 20 years. Parsons' satisfaction was evident. He tried contacting Amanda for bail money. She blocked his number. Michael allowed himself a small smile. The neighborhood? The Carlsons divorced. Linda's tennis instructor dumped her. Apparently, she couldn't afford his private lessons anymore. Tom Wilder's wife took him for everything in their divorce. He's working as a night security guard now. Parsons paused. Your brother Greg finished his community service. He's selling used cars in Phoenix. And the good judge? Reynolds died last year. Heart attack during his FBI deposition. The investigation into his judicial corruption expanded to 3 decades of cases. His reputation was completely destroyed. Another pause. Amanda didn't even attend her father's funeral. Couldn't afford the plane ticket. Michael turned to his window, watching construction crews work on his latest project. And Emma graduated medical school last month. 3.85 GPA, just above the trust requirement. She's starting her residency at Mayo Clinic. Parsons' voice softened slightly. She still sends monthly emails asking to meet. Forward those to the usual folder. Michael's tone remained professional. Anything else? Amanda's been asking around about you. Someone told her about your success in Seattle. She's been trying to find your contact information. Michael's laugh held no warmth. I'm sure she has. Forward any messages to legal. After hanging up, Michael reviewed his calendar. A charity gala tonight. He'd been named Engineering Executive of the Year. His date, Claire Thompson, was a corporate lawyer who understood the value of emotional distance. They enjoyed each other's company without complications, exactly as he preferred. His phone buzzed, an email notification, Emma's monthly attempt at contact. Dear Dad, graduated medical school last month. Starting residency at Mayo Clinic. I know you already know this. You've managed my trust fund perfectly, like everything else. I understand now what you taught me about consequences. Every time I make hospital rounds, I remember how methodically you exposed our betrayal. Mom's not doing well. Salvador's trial is all over the news. She finally admitted everything. How they planned to steal my future. How she used me to help deceive you. She's working retail again. Can barely make rent. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I've learned from your calculated response. Ensuring my education while severing emotional ties was its own form of perfect revenge. You made sure I'd succeed while never letting me forget the price of betrayal. If you're ever willing to talk, love, Emma. Michael archived the email without replying. His daughter had learned her lesson. Success tainted by the knowledge of what she'd thrown away. Some bridges once burned should stay demolished. Across the country, Amanda Newton, now Amanda Reynolds again, locked up the small furniture store where she worked. At 47, the stress of the past 5 years had taken its toll. Her designer clothes were long gone, replaced by off-the-rack retail uniforms. The plastic name tag reading, assistant manager, felt like a constant reminder of her fall. Her studio apartment waited, walls bare where expensive art once hung. The TV was tuned to news about Salvador's trial. 3 more wealthy women had come forward, describing the same pattern of manipulation and theft. His smooth yoga instructor persona had cracked during cross-examination, revealing the predator beneath. She thought about Michael sometimes. Seeing his name attached to massive successful projects, the local news had covered his latest award. He looked distinguished in the photos, power and confidence evident in every line. The woman on his arm was elegant, professional. Everything Amanda had thrown away. Her phone held hundreds of unsent messages to him. Apologies. Explanations. Pleas for help. None of them mattered. Michael had orchestrated their destruction with the same precision he brought to his engineering projects. The evidence he'd gathered had been comprehensive, the timing perfect, the execution flawless. A text from Emma lit up her screen. "Mom, saw the news about Salvador's trial. Are you okay?" Amanda stared at the message. Her daughter's success felt like another part of Michael's revenge, ensuring Emma achieved everything they'd planned to steal from her, while making sure she understood exactly what her betrayal had cost. Across town, Greg Reynolds arranged cars on his used car lot. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly, making his cheap suit stick to his skin. The SEC investigation had destroyed more than his startup. His reputation in tech was ruined, his assets seized, his investors. Lawsuits still pending. He tried contacting Michael multiple times over the years. His brother's response had been silence, broken only by formal communications through lawyers. The precision of Michael's revenge still stunned him. How he'd gathered evidence for months, planning the perfect moment to trigger their collective destruction. In Nevada, Salvador Knox sat in county jail, awaiting trial. His designer yoga wear had been replaced by prison orange, his confident smile erased by the weight of evidence against him. Michael's meticulous documentation had exposed decades of cons, leading more victims to come forward. His latest lawyer, a public defender, had been blunt. "Take the plea deal. 20 years is better than what you'll get at trial." Salvador had tried contacting Amanda, hoping she had hidden resources. Her response had been to block his number. The woman who'd once planned to share his Malibu dream now wouldn't even accept his calls. Back in Seattle, Michael left his office for the charity gala. Claire waited in the lobby, elegant in a blue evening gown. "Congratulations on the award," she said, accepting his offered arm. "Though I heard some interesting gossip about your past." "Ancient history," Michael replied smoothly. "Thoroughly documented and filed." "Away." Claire smiled, understanding perfectly. They made a striking couple. Successful. Controlled. Emotionally distant. Exactly what Michael required now. The gala celebrated his latest triumph. Another failing project turned successful. Another impossible problem solved. His acceptance speech was professional, focused on engineering excellence and project management precision. Only he knew that his greatest project had been the systematic dismantling of his betrayers' lives. Every detail planned, every reaction predicted, every consequence precisely calculated. Later that night, Michael stood in his penthouse apartment, watching his city sparkle below. Seattle had welcomed him, rewarding his expertise with greater successes. His new life was exactly what he'd designed: controlled, profitable, and free from emotional complications. His phone buzzed with another news alert. Yoga instructor faces 20 years for fraud scheme. Salvador's unshaven face filled the screen, his yoga serenity replaced by desperate fear. Another email from Emma arrived. "Dad, finished my first week of residency. Still learning from your lessons about consequences." Amanda's latest attempt to contact him had been blocked by his lawyers. Greg's monthly request for reconciliation went unopened. Judge Reynolds' posthumous disgrace continued to unfold in legal journals. Michael allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 5 years had proven the perfection of his revenge. He had crafted their destruction as carefully as he designed his bridges, ensuring their punishment was both complete and enduring. The Seattle night stretched before him, full of new projects and opportunities. Behind him, the wreckage of his former life served as a constant reminder. Every betrayal had its price, and Michael Newton knew exactly how to collect. He turned back to his latest blueprints. The past was thoroughly documented and filed away. He had new structures to build, new challenges to solve, and if his success served as a constant reminder to those who had betrayed him, well, that was just another perfectly calculated outcome. The price of betrayal had been high, but Michael had made sure they all paid in full. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.